Good afternoon. Here in Melbourne, the sun is shining. The kangaroos are happy. Yesterday they had a miserable day. It was cold and wet. Now they're sunbathing under the sun. So we have a few questions have come in to be answered. First one, Dear Ajahn, usually I can deal with pain in meditation. However, I just had surgery and the bodily pain now can be so intense that I can't meditate. Grateful for any encouragement or advice. Well, this is quite common, especially as we age, get older, things go wrong with the body. Obviously you can have surgery at any age, but as we get older it's more likely. And before, during and after surgery there's often pain to endure. So you have our sympathy, our compassion. Partly with pain, it's the pain itself is just what it is. It's pain as the body is healing, things have been damaged. Surgery is a very extreme thing, isn't it? You cut into the body, so things get damaged and it leaves a trail of pain, and that may last for a long time as you recover, occasionally for a lifetime. So one part of pain is just being patient with it, accepting it's happened. The surgery has happened, I assume for a good reason, that you're trying to cure or help the body recover in some way. But you may not be able to do much about it, and there's only so much you can do with painkillers, medication for pain. So then you have to get your attitude right, don't you? How to live with this pain and try and catch your reactions to the pain, because it's very common that it will be a cause for you to have irritation, aversion, disappointment that you have to deal with this pain. And you have all this, possibly have all this negative thinking coming up around the pain, stimulated every time you think of it. It can make you physically and mentally tense. So many possibilities with pain. But you say you can't meditate. Well, obviously you might not be able to meditate in the way you've meditated previously. You might not be able to sit cross-legged on the floor with a straight back. So physically there may be limitations. Or like you say, the pain is very intense, so to just sit there and be with the pain is very challenging. So you have our sympathy, but I would look into exploring what you can do, how you can be with this pain with a more mindful, compassionate attitude in your mind and a more mindful relationship. Because the aversion to the pain is often as much as the problem as the pain itself. I'm not you, so I can't speak for you. I don't know how intense your pain is, but from my own experience and other people I know, often a change in attitude and you might say getting used to the pain, but realizing that how you think about it, how you view it, is as important as how the pain itself is coming up. That's something you can look into, because you can change attitudes, you can change your view. So any way that you can improve your level of mindfulness as you're dealing with this pain. So, for example, say you've previously meditated in one way and you can't do that anymore. Say previously you used the breath meditation to calm your mind, bring up mindfulness. Now every time you try to do breath meditation, you can't because you keep thinking of the pain, and the pain comes up into consciousness too much for you to follow the breath. That may be an example. Maybe you can experiment with other forms of meditation. Can you recite something? Can you chant, recite a sutta or a verse of protection, or even a word or a phrase? Sometimes recitation is more doable than something as subtle as the breath. Here I'm just giving an example, but you may see if there's any meditation object that you haven't tried before, that you may now start exploring, that may be able to hold your attention as you're dealing with this intense pain. And as far as attitudes go, well, cultivating the attitude of kindness and compassion for yourself, just as you would have that for someone else, maybe a family member, if they had a lot of pain, you would be looking at ways how to reassure them, encourage them, soothe them, anything that you can do to alleviate their suffering. You direct that same way of thinking to yourself in this situation. So, how you talk to yourself, try to develop metta in the way you reflect and talk to yourself. Try to cultivate metta and karuna, compassion, on a daily basis in your attitude. And maybe try to be creative, just to see what new ways of practice, what new ways of thinking, what new reflections, attitudes can help. Sometimes external things help, so listening to the Dhamma or listening to chanting, people can find that helpful. When you're listening to a Dhamma talk, gives you something, gives you some knowledge and maybe improves your faith. And as you're listening, it takes you away from the pain, but you might say in a wholesome way. So I think there's a number of things to explore. Don't give up, because many people have managed to adjust to a new reality of having a lot of pain in their life, using meditation techniques, using the Dhamma, using chanting, using these different things to help. Because in the end you don't have any choice. You've got to keep going. So if you can introduce the Dhamma in any way you can to help soothe your mind and help bring up more mindfulness so that you can catch particularly the aversion to the pain. Like when you're truly mindful, your mind is not proliferating, it's not creating anything out of your experience when you're mindful. Mindfulness is the basis for equanimity. So if you can get your mind to be mindful of the pain, even for short periods of time, and see that the pain is just a feeling, but it's not a person or a being, your attitude changes. You don't take it quite so personally. Obviously it's something you have to endure and it's unpleasant in its nature, but it's that taking ownership of it is where the real suffering comes. So anything that helps you to establish mindfulness and reflect, this is not self, will help. And I've known one or two monks who been meditators, and they've had one monk I knew had extreme migraines that would, most of his waking hours he was living with migraines. That he said it's just like having something piercing your brain or piercing your head all the time. And you could see he was constantly under the pressure of this intense pain. I forget what the cause was. Something to do with maybe he had a stroke or some problem. And then these migraines and this pain in his head got worse and worse in the later part of his life. And he used obviously a lot of patience, endurance, and then just a lot of mindfulness directed to his meditation object, which he used. Normally he used Buddha, reciting Buddha, 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 till the mind would become one-pointed on the Buddha recitation. Then the pain wouldn't be so bad. It's always there in the background because it was a very intense physical feeling, but the recitation of Buddha, keeping the mind on that, helped him to cope with it. And he did for many years do that. So we can train the mind, even in the most intense, painful situations. So don't give up, just see what you can do, even for short periods. Try to practice developing a mindfulness around maybe recitation of Buddha or some other Pali word or phrase or a chant that you know. Maybe that can help. And we say make friends with the pain. If you can't get rid of it, learn to live at peace with it, not to make a lot of suffering out of it, just to accept it. Oh, this is the way it is. And kind of be very patient and loving towards yourself with that pain. Dear Luang Por, please explain the use of the sound of silence as an object of meditation. Thank you. Well, as we know, this is particularly a meditation technique that Luang Por Sumedho, whose 90th birthday, I believe, is tomorrow, and many of you will know him. It's something he's made quite well known through his own practice. I haven't personally used it, so I'm not really one to explain, but in the most simple terms, say when you come into a quiet place, say like this hall, when you come into this hall and you're not talking or listening to someone talk, you very quickly pick up on the slight sound you get in your ears because it's such a peaceful, quiet hall. So many meditation halls, caves, places where there's very little sound, very little wind, very little sound of other external things. You tend to pick up much more quickly on this inner sound. What it is, I don't know, whether it's the sound of, the hiss, the vibration of in your ears. It's just a sound, receiving sound, saying the ears are working. I don't know what the medical explanation for this sound is, but it's there. And anyone who pays attention, brings your attention back to your body, can notice it. I did use it once when I was a young monk, and temporarily I had to run a monastery and I had some other monks staying with me who were arguing a lot and not happy together, not very harmonious. They were visiting monks. I was the regular resident monk and all the senior monks had left for a week. So I was in charge of the monastery for a week, and I had these visiting monks sitting either side of me arguing, and they're often arguing over the top of me because I was in the middle and one was on one side and another on another. So each ear was receiving a lot of negativity. One monk would be telling me about this other monk and how bad he was, and then the other monk would be telling me how bad the first monk was, and so both my ears were kind of on fire with the negativity coming from these two other monks. It was just one of those things. So when I went back to my hut in those days I did a lot of walking meditation in the daytime. I'd be walking up and down on my walking path, and the memory of all the words that these monks had been filling my ears with would come up. And there'd be the thought, is it true what they're saying? What shall I do about this? And these two monks, are very angry with each other. Is there anything I can do? Just trying to process it. And it was kind of like this chatter would carry on in my head just through memory and the effect it had had on me. And so I'm walking up and down, and I thought, I'm really tired of this chatter, because it was nothing to do with me personally, really. I was just a witness to it, but it was very disturbing. So I did actually start to just contemplate the sound of silence, because I thought maybe that will help me when these two monks are arguing around me. I just go to the sound of silence, this kind of buzz in the ear. So even though there's sound coming to the ear, I just go with the buzz, the sound of the silence, and stick with that as an object. I could have stuck with the breath, because I did a lot of breath meditation, and I was quite used to that. But for some reason, this seemed to be useful at this time, because I was receiving a lot of negative verbal comments in my ears every day. So I just developed the sound of silence for a few days, over and over again, putting my attention on that sound as an object, and gradually separated the mind from all this negative speech and the memories of the words and the negativity. And in the end, I entered a very peaceful state of samadhi, which I kept going for a few more days until all the senior monks in the monastery returned. And I was no longer in that position, because as soon as they returned, these two monks stopped arguing and things changed. But I learned a good lesson how to let go of the negativity rather than carry it around, take it personally as my personal baggage to kind of keep thinking about, remembering, making me feel sad. I just went to the sound of silence, which was very peaceful, and stuck with that as the focus of my attention. I did that over and over again, and I became very peaceful. So whether I was sitting, walking, I just used the sound of silence for a few days, and it's like it changed the whole dynamics of this situation I was in. So that's my only real practice with it. There was one other time I practiced with the sound of silence, and that was when I was doing a retreat in a cave. Totally dark cave and totally silent cave. I did about 4 months of retreat, and when you're in a cave and it's totally silent and there's nothing happening, there's not much stimulation, so obviously you become much more aware of your mind, and the sound of silence was also becoming very pronounced, because there's no sound from the outside, so then you just hear the hiss, the vibration in your ears all the time. So occasionally I used it then. But generally speaking, I haven't used it. I've used mindfulness of breathing as my main meditation object, and then the contemplation of the body. But like any meditation object, if it helps you, you find it satisfying to you to put your attention on it, brings up more mindfulness, more continuity of mindfulness, you're happy, you're satisfied to use it as a meditation object, well, try it. You want to find meditation objects that suit you, suit your personality, your character, and you keep doing it, and if your mind becomes more calm, more alert, mindful, and you're letting go of distractions and various moods and emotions that bother you, well, why not? So you can always experiment with it. Next question. Dear Ajahn, may I know if it's wise to continue to do sitting when I have sinus episodes? can I make use of it to contemplate on the body, that the body is subject to sickness and it will die? Doing vipassana and contemplation instead of observing my breath. I sense some frustration within me as it's making me uncomfortable. Will you have some advice for me? Yeah, if you do a lot of breath meditation, then any time you get any kind of problem with your ear, nose and throat, you start to notice it because you're used to putting attention, say, on the tip of the nose for breath meditation, perhaps, like me. That's what I do. So as soon as I get a runny nose, blocked nose, or at the moment, as you know, I've got a cough, you become very aware of all that. But at the same time, your aim is to become mindful, to pay attention and not create any additional suffering out of the experience. So you want to find a way to meditate with these things. So if it's sinus, you may have pain in your sinuses, runny nose, blocked nose and so on. Well, it's possible you may have to change the way you meditate at that time. If you're normally focused on the nose, the breathing in and out at the nose, that may be difficult. So you can experiment moving the location where you focus your mind during the breathing meditation. So maybe to the chest is one option that I've done before. You can try that. Maybe you can do more walking meditation, slow or faster walking, where you're not really focused on your sinus, you're now focused on your feet touching the ground. You get a rest from those sinuses. But if you are able to maintain mindfulness and contemplate, like you say, contemplate, oh yeah, this body is so prone to illness, so fragile, you can get colds and flu and sinus problems, runny nose, and get coughs and throat problems. There's all kinds of things that go wrong with this body. Well, you can introduce that or bring that contemplation into your practice. And when you're peaceful, you usually find you can put attention on any part of the body that is suffering or has some pain or illness. When you're peaceful, meaning when you have continuous mindfulness or even a state of samadhi or calm, you'll find it's possible to just direct attention with, you might say, the energy of metta, loving kindness from your samadhi at that part of the body that is ill. Many, many meditators have done this. You might call it self-healing. It's not a guarantee that you will be cured of that illness, but it may help because it helps you to be more relaxed around that particular illness or problem. And it sends this very good, positive, relaxing energy in the direction of a part of the body that something is not right. What you'll find is if you really become very one-pointed in samadhi, your mind unifies in samadhi, it might actually happen quite automatically that the unification of the mind leads the energy to flow to wherever there's a problem. It's very therapeutic, it's very good boost for the immune system, for the healing systems in the body. But sometimes you might do it as a conscious act as well. When the mind is calm, you send your mind to the sinus or wherever. But if you're not yet, your mindfulness is not very strong, you're still distracted, irritated by the problem, or find it hard to be with it, don't worry, you don't have to put your attention on the physical ailment. Try and find an object that you can stick with. So it could be recollection of the Buddha, again, chanting or recollection of the Buddha, the practice of loving kindness, contemplating other parts of the body. There's many meditations you can try, and other things you can try is your meditation on, say, Cakanusati, recollecting the generosity, the charity you've practiced in the past. Bringing up to mind things you've done for others, acts of charity, acts of generosity, offerings you've made, sacrifices you've made for other people. As a meditation, you contemplate this theme. Often it brings up a sense of joy, and it's totally, unrelated to your sinuses. You're just thinking about good actions you've done in the past. It can bring you a lot of joy, relax you, make you feel better, and that balances the frustration of the sinuses being painful or blocked, and so on. So I'll be creative. I'd experiment a bit and see where you can put your mind in a wholesome, in a skillful way to improve mindfulness and also to bring up wholesome reflections, because these can really help when we're ill. Dear Ajahn, we've answered this question before. So, dear Ajahn, next question. Does it matter where we should turn, clockwise or anti-clockwise direction, as we are doing the mindful walking, after walking back and forth? Do we need to walk at least 20 steps, or is it okay to walk from the sofa to the altar in my room? Is that good enough? Also, one teacher shared with me that anti-clockwise is practiced during the wake ceremony of a funeral. An example, when we walked around the coffin. I'm curious to learn from you, Ajahn, is this true? Aren't we clinging to rites and rituals in this case? Well, the fact that you're asking the question means your mind is quite open, and that's a good sign. It means you're not clinging very much because you're asking the question. When you're really clinging, you don't ask questions anymore, do you? You just stick with your view. This is the one and only way to do it. Generally speaking, like you say, the teachers talk about the clockwise direction being a bit more auspicious than the anti-clockwise. I mean, it just makes sense in terms of a clock, doesn't it? If the clock goes forward in a clockwise direction, you understand the time, and the hands of the clock are easy to read. If it goes anti-clockwise, it starts to get confusing. If time seems to be going backwards, it's just confusing, isn't it? Having said that, when you fill your sink with water in the northern hemisphere, the water always goes down, spinning one way down the plug hole. When you're in the southern hemisphere, like we are here in Australia, the water goes in the opposite way. So don't make too much out of all this clockwise, anti-clockwise. It just depends partly on location and things like that. But I was also taught to always turn clockwise. Maybe partly it's from the practice when you show respect to someone from the ancient time of the Buddha. You always have your right shoulder to the Buddha or the person of respect. You could say it's an attachment to a superficial practice, you could say that, but still, sometimes it's useful to have a certain practice that everyone agrees, a convention that everyone agrees that's a respectful thing to do. So we, as monks, we have an open shoulder, except for when it's cold, when we have some kind of t-shirt or something on to protect it from the cold. But generally we have an open shoulder. We keep the open shoulder, the right shoulder, towards the object of respect. Say if you're circumambulating around a Buddha statue, you go in a clockwise direction. There are certain things that seem to represent this. So if you ever have Buddha relics and you've seen the ceremony where you bathe Buddha relics, you place them on the water, they themselves move in a clockwise direction around the water. And I've done this quite a few times in my life, and it's always seemed to be true. So it seems to be the direction of that which is wholesome, good, pure, the direction moving away from defilement, we say. Monks who have attained great psychic ability and can see other people's minds, know other people's minds. One of the ways they describe the human mind, they say, when the mind is following kilesa, it tends to go in one direction, anti-clockwise. It kind of moves in that way. When it's following the path, it spins in the clockwise direction. And notably, we talk about the Buddhist path like a wheel, the Dhammacakka wheel. It spins or it turns in a clockwise direction. That's considered the path of eradicating defilement for purity, for the unconditioned. Whereas the anti-clockwise is like turning your mind back towards the condition, towards attachment, towards defilement, greed, anger, delusion. Ajahn Chah used to talk about how the effect of defilements, craving, ignorance, craving, attachment on the mind is like a screw turning in, tightening. So if you ever do woodwork or any kind of, assemble some kind of machine or piece of furniture using screws, when you turn the screw in, you're going one way and it gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And that, he used to say that's like your mind becoming tighter with the turning. Whereas you turn the other way, it's loosening, sort of letting go. These are just metaphors, just similes about the mind being tight, suffering, loosening, letting go, and not suffering. There's many ways we look at the mind. But yeah, traditionally, turning in the right, turning clockwise is considered to be a respectful, appropriate direction to turn. But if you're, for some health reason or for your personal reason, you have to turn anti-clockwise, the important thing is to be mindful, isn't it? Be mindful as you turn. That's one reason why you walk back and forward. You walk to the end of your path, whether it's 2 or 3 steps to the sofa, fine, if that's all you've got, or 20 steps or 30 steps, whatever you've got. You walk to the end of your designated path. You stop, and that helps you to bring up mindfulness, doesn't it? You'll notice as you're walking, your mind starts to wander, doesn't it, very easily. When you get to the end of the path, you have to physically stop and turn around. Just that already brings you back to the body, back to the present moment. It helps to put a brake on the endless proliferation of the mind. So you stop, turn around, you start walking back. If you keep stopping every few minutes, a few moments, it helps to interrupt the flow of your kilesas, the endless craving and proliferation. So it's quite a useful thing to walk back and forth. This is why we do it this way. You can walk meditation just going in a continuous walk, around a park or a natural area. And that's okay as well. But you'll find there's a tendency for the mind to roam as you walk. Whereas if you're doing the walking back and forth on a designated path, you tend to be more mindful, especially in the beginning. If you're in a room, like we're on retreat at home, like this online retreat, you just make the best you've got of the place you've got. You might have a corridor or a few steps, doesn't matter. You just make the best of what you've got. And a short distance, you just probably have to walk very slowly, very mindfully, a few steps to the sofa, stop, turn around, come back. That's fine. That will do as well as walking very fast along a long route. In the end, the aim is to be mindful of your body, of an object such as the feet or the recitation of Buddha. If you've done a lot of breath meditation, you may be able to be mindful of the breath as you walk, but that's quite a subtle sensation. So in the beginning, I wouldn't recommend that. And you can also contemplate as you walk. You're walking back and forth. You're noticing what thoughts are arising in your mind, whether they're wholesome or not wholesome. Wholesome thoughts tend to make you feel more relaxed, at ease. Unwholesome thoughts tend to spin your mind out, more tense, more stressed. Each thought arises and ceases. Maybe you can watch that. Sensations in your body, you can observe different sensations, the feeling of the feet, the feeling of the air on your body. You notice how maybe your eyes are looking, the mind going through the eyes is looking for some stimulation as you walk. So, if you're really bored, you'll be trying to think about even the most mundane object in your house. You've got a picture on the wall or a piece of furniture, and your mind will go out from your body and start thinking, oh, I really need to change that, or that needs to be fixed, or where did I buy that? Where did that go? Your mind will get caught up in all kinds of stories and imagination based on very ordinary things that you encounter as you're walking. For monks, we use walking meditation a lot to deal with sleepiness, especially if you are late at night, early in the morning. The desire is to sleep, so quite often you make yourself walk for a period of time. So Ajahn Chah, one of the teachings he once gave, he said, well, at night we like to sleep, so when it's dark, make sure you walk at least 1 hour of meditation in the dark, outside your hut. Go down from your hut and walk back and forth for an hour in the forest. Use a light, obviously a candle or some kind of camping light or something. But make yourself do that. Make yourself walk when you would rather sleep. It can be a very good practice to just bring up energy. Because when you're sitting, if you sit for many hours, you become very dull and drowsy easily. So do more walking sometimes. And if you're walking in the forest, there'll be things that stimulate you, keep you awake, because there'll be the sound of animals, the trees moving in the wind, strange shapes. Maybe you are scared of ghosts, scared of sounds. Maybe there's some person prowling around the forest. You're wondering what that is. There's so many stories of people's encounters with things as they're walking meditation in the forest. You can see how it's a very good way to wake your mind up and contemplate a few different attachments, particularly fear. One of the things I always remember is when I was in the forest, the deep forest in Thailand, the jungle, when walking meditation at night, usually it didn't have many candles, so you just put one candle in the middle of your path. You might have 20 paces, say. So you walk from the middle where the candle is to the end of the path, 10 or 15 paces, say. Stop, turn around, as we've been describing, and you walk back past the candle to the other end of the path where it's dark because you're far away from the candle. Stop, turn around, and you walk back to the candle. Now, if you're in a forest where there are a lot of wild animals, potentially tigers, bears, elephants, cobras, there's a certain reluctance to go where it's dark because you can't see what might be there, and your mind will create possibilities, and out of fear and out of too much imagination, we start to imagine things, create things. So you walk to the end of your path. When I was first doing this as a young monk, my hairs would stand on end when I got to the end of the path and it was dark. And I'd stand there, my hairs would all come up on goosebumps, stand on the end out of fear. Then I'd turn around and then I'd come back to the candle, and the candle becomes your best friend. And you don't want to leave the candle because where the candle is, it's light. It's your best friend. You feel warm, happy. Oh, my best candle here. So if there's a gust of wind and the candle blows out, it's like, oh no, my candle is blown out. Oh, what'll I do? You quickly have to light it again. Or if the candle burns down and runs out, you quickly got to get another candle to light it again. The candle is your best friend. It's your only hope against the dark forces of the forest. Your mind quite naturally does that. I didn't even create a lot of thoughts about it. It's just where it's dark, you feel afraid. Where it's light, you feel better. And you just observe that attachment. And one candle is the difference between life and death, kind of thing. So, of course, observing this, I would also laugh at myself. But at the same time, I couldn't stop it. My hairs would stand on end in the dark. The same would be when walking through the forest at night. Sometimes you actually have to turn your candle off. Like we would walk with candle lanterns because you don't have enough batteries to walk with a torch if you're walking many kilometers. So you walk with a candle, but then sometimes even the candles are gone. So you walk in the dark with just using the stars or the moonlight. And that walk is one of the most unpleasant things. You don't know what you could tread on, a scorpion or ants that bite you, or a snake, or you might encounter some wild animal in the dark and you just don't know what's going to happen. So it would be quite a stimulating practice to do that kind of thing. And Ajahn Chah used to say, walk around the forest in the dark. If you want to wake up and be very mindful, that's a good practice to do. Makes you very careful, very mindful, because you don't know whether you'll trip over something, the root of a tree, or bump into something, or actually meet some creature or a ghost or something. So walking meditation at night can be a very helpful practice for waking you up and just getting you to see a few attachments. In this monastery in Australia, I've walked meditation at night in the dark, and I've regularly encountered animals. I've literally tripped over a wombat. If you know a wombat, wombats are like the size of a koala bear, but they're in the ground. They live in a hole in the ground and they come out and eat grass and leaves on the ground. And sometimes they just sit there or stand there eating the grass and they don't move. So you're walking, and if you're walking without a torch, you don't realize they're there because they're immobile, dark. And I've tripped over one before. He didn't like it. He growled, but he didn't hurt me. Just moved on a bit. Sometimes you meet kangaroos, deer, you meet animals. Luckily, here in Australia, I haven't met any snakes at night. But in Thailand, also met snakes at night, and you're sort of walking in the dark, and every step becomes very important. Where am I going to place my foot? Is there a snake there? And if you meet a snake, you become even more mindful. So sometimes that kind of practice can be very good for bringing up mindfulness, taking care. At home, what you notice is we're addicted to comfort, aren't we? So you walk for a little bit and then you want to sit down and you want to look at your phone and do this, do that. It's so easy for your mind just to turn off and not be very mindful and not pay much attention to things. We go into habits, don't we? Habits of thought, habits of reacting to things, imagination, daydreaming, or just sleep. So sometimes walking meditation at home, you'll find changes your attitude towards your home. You realize, I can be mindful every step if I practice. Even your home can become like a forest or a monastery, a place of Dhamma practice. So I would recommend practicing the walking meditation in your room, even if it's very small little room, doesn't matter. Just take a few steps back and forth mindfully, and you'll find it's a good practice to accompany the sitting meditation. It'll help you to sit and walk longer, to meditate for longer periods of time. Luang Por, when I was about 16, I was in a classroom and suddenly everything disappeared, including me, and was just light and no thought. In the same way, suddenly everything appeared. I was in my seat and no one noticed what happened. I knew nothing about Buddhism or meditation at the time. Now that I know, I wonder, was that some state of samadhi? It never happened again, maybe because I was afraid since then that would happen again. Can you please share your opinion of what this was? Thank you for your kindness. Yeah, I think most people meditators, experienced meditators would say that's probably a sign you've been meditating before and you've experienced states of samadhi and your mind has previously converged into a state of samadhi, maybe in a previous life. And probably it's a sign prompting you to say, well, I've done this before, maybe I should start practicing again, training again, continue it, develop it further. So many people have this experience, as a child or a young adult. They've never meditated before, but their mind naturally goes into a state of samadhi. Sometimes, like you say, your sense of self just disappears. Body seems to disappear. The mind just goes to a place of light. You don't hear anything. You don't see anything. You're just with this light. That's quite common. The arising of piti and sukha in the body, in the mind, and the mind kind of turning inwards, away from the world for a period of time, is quite common. Sounds like this happened quite a while ago, so clearly you've survived. If it's only just happened, then it would be good to ask a meditation teacher. But for you, it sounds like this happened a while ago and you have some perspective on it. If you keep practicing, it's a sign, I think, that you will develop more samadhi and maybe have similar experiences again, but in a more controlled way, because when you're meditating consciously, deliberately, with the intention to train your mind, then when these experiences happen, then they're not shocking, they're not frightening so much, they're just a sign of the mind converging in samadhi, and it can happen. One of the biggest obstacles to it happening is the desire for it to happen. Many people, they have an experience of samadhi where the mind converges, lets go of the body and lets go of many distractions, and they're very peaceful. There's a great happiness. It's quite common. And then they want to repeat that, and the desire to repeat it is actually a block because there's too much desire there. So try not to practice with giving into that desire. Just set it aside and listen to the Dhamma so you're developing some understanding of the path, sila, morality, samadhi, states of concentration and calm, panya, insight. Hear the Dhamma so that as you practice you've got some good information and guidance from wise teachers and from the words of the Buddha. That will help. And then keep practicing. Try not to have too many expectations when you practice. If your mind gathers in samadhi, settles down, good. If it doesn't, see what you can learn from the experience. Often we learn as much from when the mind is not peaceful as when it's peaceful. When it's not peaceful, you see, well, what's bothering me? Where's the attachment? Where there's suffering, there'll be some attachment. So if you're suffering, your mind is scattered, your mind is angry, your mind is just worried about something, or there's something you desire that keeps bugging you. These are examples of attachment, and they agitate the mind. You're not peaceful. What's going on? What's the attachment underlying this? Where am I going wrong in my thinking? In whatever way you can contemplate to help free yourself from the attachment will help you to get through that state of agitation which your meditation practice might have exposed. So what we call bad meditations, or times when you're not peaceful and your mind's all over the place, often you can learn a lot from them. Or if you've been practicing, your mind settles down, becomes very calm, one-pointed, unified. That's good, and you may even experience something like you've experienced before, very bright, happy state of mind, letting go of the body, letting go of the world. Good. But then, when your mind emerges from that state, starts to come back to a more normal state of mind, where you start to think again, start to experience sight, sound, taste, smell, touch again after that state. Don't just stop, don't just give up the meditation. Keep your mindfulness going and contemplate what's going on here, because you'll start to see attachments forming. If you've been in a state where you're very calm, peaceful, then you start thinking again and you start reacting to things that you like and want and things you don't like, and your more normal ways of thinking come up. But now you're more mindful because you've had that separation, that temporary separation. And now you're more mindful, you can use that to contemplate things, that see the impermanence of thoughts and emotions coming up. You can contemplate and investigate things, see them as impermanent, as not self. Oh, these are just conditions of mind, they just arise, pass away. You're going to learn a lot after such an experience of samadhi. That's often where your mind is ripe to gain some insight and wisdom. So try to contemplate, maintain the mindfulness and contemplate at that time, and you'll learn a lot about yourself. If you don't do that, what happens? All your mindfulness dissolves away, disappears. You're back to square one. And maybe you can have a really deep, profound state of samadhi, very peaceful. Your mind is very detached from the world, but then you don't continue it through. So afterwards, you're just back with worrying and anger and desires, and you don't seem to have learned much from it, and that's possible. So try to keep your mindfulness and your investigation of the Dhamma going after such experiences. That will be very beneficial for you. So I think that was the last question today.